afternoon and welcome. My name is Daniel King. I'm Professor of Organisation Studies at Trent University. This is the session on impact. I didn't think ahead in terms of what am I wearing? So I'm wearing a blue shirt with some flowers maybe and a jacket. And I'm going to be chairing today's session.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex Hutchison. I'm the director of the Data for Children Collaborative, which is a specialist unit at the Edinburgh Futures Institute, University of Edinburgh. Just lots and lots of words of what our organisation might unpack as we go through this chat. What am I wearing? I'm wearing a black top and some green cords and pops of orange earrings and belt matching. I thought about you guys.
So I'm Chris Lumley. I'm Director of Innovation at NPC, which stands for New Philanthropy Capital. And we're not new. We're not just about philanthropy, and we don't have any capital. So. There we go. Big confusion with the car park. And I've been working in the impact field around measurement for the last 20 years. I'm wearing a fairly grey jumper and jeans, but my colour is also orange in my favourite running shoes.
Good afternoon. I'm Fiona Stewart-Knight from Glasgow Caledonian University. I'm the director of the Institute of University Teslas Education, and my portfolio focuses on work-based education, apprenticeships, upskilling, reskilling, catching people up on the competencies they need, and to be contemporary, to be relevant to the environment that they work in. And we work with over 360 parents in Scotland, so we're actually established. I am wearing what can only be described as a pleather dress, but a very respectable one.
Sorry, I've got a bit of time. Originally done because for those of us that originally appeared who can't see the participants describe what they look like, and it seems to have just got to a bit like was it the clothes show these? It looked like that. It came from really lockdown and being in virtual meetings with people. They go, actually,
Yeah.
we'll play more room in what you look like, but I like the way it's done.
People would rather see what they're wearing than the describe their age, I think.
Government seats, right?
Yeah. It's like, what is?
That's their figure, yes. And I'm a middle-aged man. So, no. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming then. So just to start off with that, Alistair in the session before gave a really nice introduction about impact. That did half of my job for me. And also promised that we would disagree. So there you go. I know it's very sure that we disagree, but just thinking about impact and particularly the changes that are happening now around the way that we can collect and manage data. I was thinking this morning a bit about when I started in the voluntary sector. So I ran a very small therapeutic arts organisation. It's funded back, if people remember, the Learning and Skills Council. We got some funding to do therapeutic arts. Well, right towards the end, the person who was doing it said, well, we need each to write a report. I said, actually, yeah. And what do you want to report? Mine, as long as you write a report. And you've just got to measure and evaluate to show the impact of the work you'd be doing. So, okay, what do I do if I don't write a report? What happens? You won't get your final bit of funding. Okay, £8,000, right? I'll do that. What will you do with the report? Nothing. It might go on a shelf. It might be looked at. So there was a challenge for me. And I was thinking, I hadn't done anything like this before. And at the beginning of the project, we were trying to work out, okay, how do we measure, monitor, evaluate, and do the impact of the work that we were doing? It's working with drug addiction, with domestic violence, drug and alcohol abuse, those sorts of things. And actually, the impact's really a very long scale things we hoped for the work that we were doing. So very hard to measure. My mum was a teacher. We found some pieces of paper and some things that I could photocopy, give out to the participants. The people who ran the projects used to say to me, we're going to do your evaluation and monitoring forms, things like that as well. It was a frustration. And in the end of the day, I think that, to my mind, sums up some of the challenges with impact measurement, evaluation, how we do this type of work. But also, that was 20 years ago or so, but the world's moved on. We have a lot of new possibilities with forms of data and things as well. So I wanted just to set that as a bit of a a scene setting thing for the debates around some of these perennial challenges. How do we measure? What do we measure? Are they the right things? How do we know, particularly in the life scales of a project, which could be only a few weeks or months, but the impact on people could last many years later. At the same time, maybe the world has changed a bit because of technology and things as well has enabled us to collect data in different ways. So, so just wanted to open that up as a starting point. Before I just open it to the panel, just want to know how many people in the room work in the third sector or the voluntary sector. Just quick show of hands. Okay, and how many people work in tech? So, because we've got a mixed audience, why don't we could just start off by explaining what is the thing called impact? So, do you just kick us off?
Sure. So impact measurement is both simple and complex. And so the simple bit is, right, we're here for the Tech for Good Summit. And the for good bit is the bit that matters here. You know, what Stan said, what difference are we creating? What good are we doing? What change are we making? And it's not only simple, it's really, really important to all of us. So, but then the complex is that actually it turns out that we're talking about what would have happened otherwise. Well, when we get down to it, because I may do something and that may have some effect in the world, but actually maybe that was going to happen anyway. Anyone else was going to do the same thing. So then we start talking about counterfactuals, and then we start talking about really costly evaluations and maybe even randomized control trials, with kind of experimental by academic standards. And then there's all the language around impact. So we're talking about impact measurement, but when I started my career, mostly people were talking about outcome measurement. Right? And you have the whole conversation about inputs and outputs. I'm not going to labor that point, but there are some inputs are the resources that we bring into something. So we're all inputs here today in this session. Outputs, we were just discussing, simple outputs, some words are being spoken, some time is passing. Outcomes, we'll see what actually happens as a result of this, changes or maybe learning, disagreements. And then the impacts, those things that happen that wouldn't have happened otherwise, maybe persist in the longer term. So there's all of that kind of stuff. But I think that the thing that is really important to me is that it's also trying to answer different questions. And those different questions might matter more or less depending on your perspective. So some people will think this is about, can we prove that something works, that it is effective? There's another question about how can we learn and improve and how can we do a better job? That might matter much more to a practitioner, maybe than the proof thing might matter to a funder who's saying you only get money in the evaluation. And then there are questions like, how do we hold ourselves accountable? If we're delivering services for public benefits, if we're providing something to help and improve their situation, how do we hold ourselves accountable for the work that we do and make sure that we don't do any harm, do the best job? And then around learning and knowledge, how can we share all of this stuff actually? So how do we use impact measurement evaluation to learn things that we can share so that we can build our knowledge over time? So that was not a simple definition, but it's some of the territory that I think is.
Yes. Just wanted to open that up because where it's a mixed audience and people might have different levels of knowledge and experience. But I think it's fair to say most funded projects have some sort of valuation or some other form of impact measurement. People do theories of change and different ways of trying to understand that before they do it and then work it through. And actually, there's thousands of these happening all across the country, all at the same time now as well. So there's a lot of evidence, a lot of knowledge being created around this. It becomes a really important thing for organisations to prove their work. So it shapes whether they get funding decisions and what as well. So that's hopefully provided some context and some understanding. But I want to really get into some of these perennial difficulties, but also what are, particularly because Tech for Good sort of space that we're thinking as well, what are some of the different ways that maybe exist in 2024 and maybe in the early 2000s when I said about that experience I had, didn't really exist as well. But first of all, Alex, just a bit more about the work that you do, first of all, and then the way in which you engage with these sort of questions.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. The work that we do is building collaborative teams of academics, private sector, public sector to address challenge-led questions for organisations that work with children. So UNICEF, a local authority, the Promise, who to help care experienced children in Scotland, those kind of organisations can come to us and say, we're trying to solve this problem. We need data expertise, sort it out, and you help us to do that. And then we build a collaborative team around that and deliver a project with the person who has to help them. And we hope then that we've got some outputs, some outcomes, and some impact. But as an organisation, we started out as a partnership between UNICEF, the University of Edinburgh, Scottish Government. So I had 3 masters that I was trying to prove the impact for. So to go back to electricity perspective, identifying who we were trying to serve and what we were trying to serve, who are we accountable to, what's our purpose, and how do we justify that we delivered against that purpose as our kind of like barometers for impact measurement. And so had worked quite hard to develop a common understanding between those 3 organizations that we could have our own theory of change that met with their needs, that was for us to deliver against. And so that meant that we could then think about our impact in our terms. Again, it would relate to what they wanted out of the organization, what they wanted to happen. We were never going to answer the question that people love to ask us: how many children did you save today? And people will obviously ask UNICEF that, and it kind of feels like that's more upon them to deliver that part of the change. Our change, step in front of that, which is how do we help you guys to get better at your program, development, humanitarian action. So really stepping back and going, this is our remit, this is our purpose, this is how we're going to deliver it, and we've got a theory of change that supports that, allowed us to almost categorize all of our activity in some way or another. So we knew what our inputs were, our outputs, and our outcomes, planned outcomes. And the way that we then reflect on all of our projects. So our portfolio is really broad. We're doing this morning's meetings were all with Kazakhstan about social media data and whether you can understand adolescent mental health through language nuance. That kind of how do you take young people's perspectives, how to do that. The projects the big one we've done is like climate risk index for children. So really thinking about children's vulnerability and exposure to climate risks. So two little examples. What we do with each of these projects is at the end and ongoing nature, every 6 months, we re-engage with all the people that we worked with on that project. So yes, the customer who asked for the thing to be delivered, but the academics, the young people, the private sector partners, we go back out and we interview, because it's all about the stories and their experience. How we log it against our theory of change is up to us. We need to hear the stories. And it's the incidental, unplanned impact that you get lit up by because you didn't expect that thing to happen that you didn't know it. You need to keep it. So there's my very long answer about how we do it.
We didn't. The end of the question to you.
So I suppose the angle that I am interested in from a systemic and a kind of bigger picture perspective is we have lots of, I think it would be controversial.
We did promise.
You have very strong expertise here that you're giving out from an impact measurement perspective based on huge projects, complex pieces of consultancy work, diagnostic work, etc. But the trouble is that the third sector has to a large extent exist, contribute, and operate successfully, ask the right questions, and additionally have some element of the skills that the experts have contributed can. So how do they do that? How do they access that? How do they know where to start? And sadly, in the majority of cases, the third sector is populated with a lot of enthusiasts who have professional skills in some areas, but that doesn't mean to say they don't these professional skills. And so a lot of what I do for a living is looking at the kind of diagnostic skill side and trying to say, where are the gaps? How do we mobilize people? How do we make businesses more successful? How do we make third sector organizations who are professional so that they can then secure funding, so that they can then argue the right case, the right cause, etc. And I think that's where the emphasis needs to be, because there is so much of a lack of awareness, if you like, of the skills gaps in certain areas. And things like apprenticeships exist across the UK to tackle some of those gaps, but are they responding to the right questions and the right challenges? Is it obvious to people that government over time has broadly expected the third sector to step in and deliver public sector services? And especially happen overnight, and that being skilled, qualified to make those calls and make those decisions. And at the other end, from a user perspective, how do users of services cope with lack of funding because a very sector organization was not empowered with the right kinds of technically qualified professional people to be able to keep the funding and not end up in a really difficult position. And I remember from I volunteered with an organization, a tiny organization that did a very, very important piece of work, and that important piece of work was giving work and recovery to alcoholics and drug addicts by giving them physical labor, gardening type work, landscaping, tree surgery, that kind of thing, to really help them work up. But those running business were seen as successful candidates who'd been through the service, who'd gone from being service user to an employee. They had funding coming from different places. One day, somebody replied to, say, Funding X was the NHS. They replied to the NHS about the funding that they received from a computer organization. And one was about drug reporting, the other one was about alcohol reporting. They got it put on to it. And so they got into trouble. And when people came to look at the detail behind it, they said, show me where all your files are, the work that people have been doing, the funding that's been used, etc. And everybody had previously almost talked about the SWOT filing cap for the office. Never wearing the study. Yeah. So she eventually got the filing cap code and literally snap. That's like get the filing that. And this is £200,000 worth of funding 10 years ago. 15 years ago. So it's a lot of money. We need to work to empower people through all of the publicly funded, levy-funded mechanisms to help professionalize organizations. And that just means to say that people don't know how to hear it, which means they may not have the right skills and knowledge to deliver this particular response, which as technology evolves is more data-centric, is more data science-centric, it's more analytical. You need to be more empowered in a different way, systems in a sense. And algorithms need to be comfortable with literacy. So how do we fix it? How do we have
Just a bit about a little bit about what NPC do, but say a little bit more about that and then particularly around work with impact.
Yeah, so we're a charity ourselves. We are one part think tank, one part consultancy. So as a consultancy, we work with other charities and sometimes funded businesses, and we do things like helping them develop theories of change and minimum frameworks and do their evaluation. On the think tank side, we're trying to look at these tools and help develop the practice and see whether they're working and kind of zoom out. And when I think about, whether they're working, I think my answer on the whole is no. But for most stakeholders, they're not. Talked about evaluations sat on a shelf, almost like shelves were invented.
Yeah.
And you look at stretched staff teams who feel overburdened by collecting data that doesn't seem to make sense to them.
Yep.
And I've always, you get this growing kind of realization that if it isn't serving the needs of any stakeholders, it certainly isn't right. So I think, those questions are really interesting. Should third sector practitioners be professionalised and turned into semi-researchers in order to do their job? Or actually, if we think about what Alistair and Scottish Tech Army are suggesting in another session, should there be shared learning as well as shared repositories of template tools? Shouldn't we know stuff as a field? Shouldn't that progress so that actually, if you're a practitioner working in social care, that's part of your training and it's coming out of the shared learning, so you don't have to reinvent it from scratch every time? Because my one big frustration is that because funders are calling the tune to such an extent, we're actually competing with our evaluations rather than trying to share learning. And because this a concrete example, we're big believers in what we call shared measurement, so common measurement frameworks that multiple organizations can use so that you can learn and compare those things. And a number of years ago, we were developing one around youth employment called the Journeys to Employment Framework, JET. And what we found is that the challenges in adoption by third sector organizations are so huge because they're under such pressure to look unique, because they're being asked by funders, why are you unique? That's what these applications say. Why are you uniquely well placed to do this? And so they're answering uniquely. And so actually everyone wants their own measurement framework. They don't even want to be measured in the same sense. So we have to break out of that. And actually, when you talk to practitioners, they just care about, they care about what they're doing. Of course, they want to be accountable. So they need to be supported to learn together. And that's, that doesn't look very much like a lot of the evaluation stuff, but maybe that's about communities of practice, funders and public sector investing in the field mostly.
And it reminds me when my organization I said, why are we doing your funding forms? It's like, because there was an imposition and it was getting in the way of work. It's what free experience was. And it made me think then around whose interests and design, and then everybody then gets used to then saying, almost playing the game. So you don't want people at the beginning of a project saying, yes, I feel really good about this, because the only way is down. So you have to then have a conversation with people. So people play games with this stuff. So, and I think uniqueness stuff is really challenging. Wow. What can you do differently? So you work across a range of different projects and programs that again have got a unique specs that Trish was just talking about. What are the ways of managing that, do you think?
Well, I think we've tried to do it really systematically. So we have a phrase that we use all the time that we're on teams, we see each other say it, we know we should come back, we say case by case, because every one of our projects is so different that we go like, well, we do that on a case by case basis, i.e., going to make it up for this project. Yeah, we're going to figure that out. Yeah, but we'll get to figure it out. So, but with impact measurement, we are trying to her all these really unique things into one systematic way of reporting prevention. My challenge to my team was, how do I know which of my projects that I've invested our funding in did the best? So it's almost like that's unanswerable. But what we've tried to do is categorize that theory of change outcomes down to what kind of change are we talking about? Is it behavioral? Is it organizational? Is it systemic? So we've got like 9 categories that we tailor all of the little stories against. When we talk about scale, depth, and duration, so is it a local or a national or a global impact that we've had? Is it one person who's had a behavior change? Is it a team? Or is it a full program and reaching some Africa changed how they operate? And then we talk about duration. So was it a pilot? Was it proof of concept? Done it? Or is this like long-term change? And by grading each of these little stories, we're just able to kind of fold up and have an overarching view of the difference. We really love the difference. We want the difference, but we also need some way of making sense of the madness.
But then so one of the ways, as I said, we create this common framework. So each individual project is trying to prove that actually their thing works. So when we talk about evaluation, when we talk about impact, we talk about measure. We're not honest brokers in the situation, are we? And often then we're trying to show, to prove to people that this works, we get more funding in the future. Does that not end up being a bit of a challenge and a difficulty, even with best intentions? Just said about sorry, every project will try to show what they did really worked, and maybe they've got different judgment about what is meaningful for them. Wow.
Sometimes maybe it's a case of some independent third party needing to be helping to organise that information. I don't know if anyone's ever come across something Justice Data Lab. There's no reason you would unless you're a criminal justice charity or a statistician or researcher. But some government has a lot of really beautiful data, administrative data that it needs in that case to run criminal justice systems, prisons, courts, and so on. So they know whether people re-offend. They know all of that. What they don't know is what programs people might be interacting with that might influence those outcomes. But the charities who deliver programs do. So you put those two data sets together. So the Justice Data Lab is something we helped to spark the creation of and work with the Ministry of Justice to help design. And there's a team within the UK Ministry of Justice, a team of analysts who, if you're a charity, you work with people within the criminal justice system, you send them a list of the people that you work with, and you get back the outcomes of that group at the group level. There's no individual data being shared, but you get the aggregate outcomes, and you get a comparison group. They've got lots of data and they can match lots of participants for free. So you get an evaluation to a pretty high quality done for free. The really exciting thing about it, if anyone wants to go and geek out, go look up Justice Data Lab statistics, and you can see every study that they've done over the history of the Justice Data Lab over the last 12, 13 years on one single chart. So you can see housing interventions, and you can see which ones statistically significantly reduced offending, which ones were inclusive, and which ones statistically significantly increased reoffending. So programs that seem to make things worse. And that's kind of dynamite data. You don't see that often, do you? Comparisons across a whole sector. And from the perspective of being accountable to the people who are really vulnerable in society and really need our help, it looks like some of these programs are making their lives worse. But the point is, government's got that data. And I wonder, in the tech for good world, with increasingly digitally enabled services where there is data flowing through the veins of these products and services, what analogies we can have for where data can be, harvested and analysed and looked at. It doesn't have to be the job of the practitioner who we get on and do their work.
Interesting. I think particularly Charities often have it. They want people like that's project. Actually, the long-term outcomes. That's not interesting. I think to go back to you, do the 6 month things.
More.
But also, people are not part of just a individual project, are they? They're in webs of different things. So the idea of, I think, often evaluation and impact is my particular thing led to that outcome. But actually, people live in webs of lots of different information, huge number of things. Can you distill that what your single intervention did for somebody? Actually, it's multiple, isn't it? It's a web of stuff. Something that's a bit, but also there's certain things that we sort of never work, but we keep on evaluating them. You just think, well, if we actually just say to some things, this approach works, and we will just trust that bit, get on and do that. But you don't need to keep monitoring the quality of it. You don't need to monitor the outcome. We don't know, so we actually not always focusing on the right things as well.
I think there are a lot of longitudinal studies and very integrated studies like population health in Glasgow, particularly, or population health in the context of living near water in Glasgow, and multiple deprivation indicators that show disparity. But then the data that's collected, because it is government data, it is collected in a way that allows it to become open source in a controlled fashion at the other end, has a home in things like safe probes, which sit within universities that can be accessed as justice data can be. And you should imagine that it can then be leveraged in a multi-generational context to apply to other projects that are open. But we're back in the domain of complex, sophisticated skills and not the ordinary domain of I'm a three-man, third sector organization that doesn't have a doctorate and can't code, and I don't know how to structure my research. So we need to be less ivory towered about some things and make sure we're more democratic in terms of parity of access to data, parity of access to experts who can support you with the data, and how do we build an ecosystem that can really perpetuate social change by linking things together in a way that everybody can access. But I do still fundamentally believe there's a bit of a golden thread around skills. You still need everybody to be more skilled and qualified than they currently are, or you will end up with haves and have-nots undeniably. And that's the thing I think we need to really remember, because not every third sector can afford to consult with you, or we're not UNICEF, is. So how do we democratize a better standard of knowledge, skills, access, proliferation of information? It's fine saying the information's there. How do I find it? How do I know what's relevant to me? And even on a simple level, I was speaking to Jane at lunchtime, one of the volunteers. Sorry, Jane. And Jane was talking about a very straightforward project that she was working on with an organisation that provided care services, particularly for people who might be remote from their parents. But the main intervention that Jane perpetuated was asking the right questions. And it wasn't technical, it wasn't complicated, but the lack of experience or perspective in which questions to ask, even in a non-data centric way, meant that the user journey and how to get the right understanding of what was available was very, very difficult. So if you can put that into the context of what we're talking about here, is back to how do we enable people to be able to do that in more organizations, so that you've got a mushroom effect and everybody can participate to a level that makes sense.
I know it's not really a Q&A, but can we just elaborate on that?
Sorry?
Not really a Q&A at the moment.
Well, actually, I enjoy up and pick up, but not.
I was really curious, because even at Guido's, in the role I'm in at the moment, we've got a science and research team, and we were saying, when I used to be a practitioner, now we're an improvement team, we need to measure impact and stuff. And they went, it sort of depends. The fundamentals of what you ask the question, qualitatively or quantitatively, or do you is it a survey, is it a focus group, all that kind of stuff aside. Oh, and it depends, 10, is it out of 5, out of 7? Oh, they change that in the centre all the time. I'm like, anyway, that all aside, it's almost like, well, every time we did it, we were learning something new, but we had to measure impact for various reasons, like, we've had funding from someone, or we've run a course, or whatever the thing is. But if people are gathering data in the wrong way, they might have asked the right questions, but they're not doing. There must be a skill, there must be a toolkit rather that could be built. We did a Word one, we did it in MS Forms, which is a lot easier, but our compliance was only about 50%. So then we had to go back and analyze the data and go back. But then my assistant in Word, it was a lot easier. Like, oh, the mailbox is empty. We can go and ask Fred why he's not done it. But actually, when we're using a more cleverly intuitive data way of doing it with MS Forms, it took longer to figure out that the compliance was dropping and stuff. So that we're almost learning our lessons that someone else has probably already figured out. So that it seems like we're coming up with potentially a solution, or a learning skill set, toolkit, whatever you want to call it, that you guys are experts at.
That's the really smart response, is to give it to ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And that's become a bit more of a response from many people to situations like that at the moment. And I suppose the benefit of ChatGPT and other forms of generative AI is they're supposed to have accumulated that body of knowledge across many areas already. So if you can get comfortable with asking them, how do I do that? And it will give you a solid answer.
Okay.
So I'm laughing because I'm thinking maybe that's the way to level it. Another controversial statement.
I just got right there. You go, have an argument.
Controversy of that. I mean, like, should it be the owners of ChatGPT who are accruing that shared data and shared learning, or should it be us, sector? I'm fed up of the investment that does exist in measurement and data and evaluation that is buried, that is not creating value, that is not leading to to progress. And so, if in a community of practice, if there is a community of practice among professional practitioners in a particular field, then funders should be supporting that learning to happen together, and the better evaluation and the sharing of questions. There's a nice initiative on question banks that an outfit called Data for Action has started, where share the questions that you're asking, and start to see, okay, these are the questions that are working for me. We've got to build this stuff like it's we know that this knowledge matters, and we know that the power dynamics of charities working on issues that in communities, power dynamics mean that they never have enough money to do the job that they're trying to do. Society doesn't want us to have it. We need to tackle those problems. So we've got to collectivize that problem. We've got to come together and get collective power out of sharing our learning. Sorry to get my soapbox, but there's potential there.
But to your point about the bias of it as well, because when it's 2,500, we said earlier, charities just in Scotland, we're a UK charity, but the bias questions you ask, because you want to go, well, before we started, things weren't that great. And then when we finished our intervention, it's all got much better, right? So the numbers went up, whether it's at 10 or percentages, right? Also, 70% of people went, yeah, thanks very much for helping us. And funders, guess what? We did a really good job. So we unconsciously bias our questions by going, and then you have to, people say, oh, you should put in ones that are reverse questions so that people aren't just saying 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, and all that kind of stuff that you like off makes sense.
So there's a few different facets of advantage to that. So there's the question banks and getting that democratized, but then saying about there's the skill set you need to actually understand some of that as well. As a quick plug in Austrian Training University, we're just inheriting, I think it's official today, from the What Works Centre for Wellbeing, which unfortunately is closing, but they had a really nice microsite about wellbeing measures. So we are inheriting and looking after and hoping to grow that as one, where actually it's got 8 different modules. It teaches you how to think about measurement of well-being, and then it's got here's some validated measures, and these are ones are open access, these are ones you have to apply for a license. That sort of question bank approach, I think, is really nice. But the other thing, just with an audience of tech people in the room, I'm really intrigued with the open tech sort of movement is a really big thing, isn't it? It's trying to make that stuff open source and all of that. So what can the charity sector, this is real more to the panel, but what can the charity sector maybe learn from that more open source approach to things, which is not how we tend to do things. I feel charity sector's cottage industry pre the Industrial Revolution. We're making our own little measurement tools in our backyard, and maybe there's ways that we could open that up, democratize it, make it available.
And we do that though because we may be in competition. And so shared data becomes actually we don't, and the charity sector is synonymous for doing it. We don't share data enough because actually we're in competition for the same funding. We're in the same field, if you like, and that is then don't share your data about how good your outcomes are. You only want your funders to see that. You don't want somebody to learn your processes and do it. And it's just synonymous with the sector, and it's sad. But that is the absolute truth. That's controversial, I know, but that is absolutely true.
The last 20 years have been set around a competition.
Yeah.
So, but are there ways, but equally, the tech sector is quite a competitive space, and it's still managed to do that. So
I was going to suggest, could you not create some kind of digital community of practice, like you do the Tech Army, use Slack, have people join, have channels for different topics, and use that. It's reasonably priced, I suppose, to do that and start sharing whatever you can share.
There's two
and have topics.
So there's a topic around learning how to gather data and ask the right questions, and there's a little bit about actually the data we can learn from other people. There's 2 separate topics.
the comment back.
And I just don't think he reasonable respect there's upskill and it's then each other. It makes sense and there in years. And I said one of the benefits of having access to STA was that boards didn't necessarily have to have somebody who's so tech savvy. In fact, STA were effectively a trusted partner. And that it was an STA project and we understood it done to so skill level that maybe data collection could be categorized in the same fashion, but it's having too much to do MSc and basic election, battle. Give other degrees, but not that.
So yeah, just to add to that, because I was just about to say, there's one thing when you're a big, Guide Dogs is a big charity. I work at Hollis Bodden Trust, which is relatively well funded. But then if you're a local charity, which is made up of 3 people, like, where does that expertise come from? And we've possibly got the luxury of coming to a conference like this because our organisations have the capacity to send us for a day, whereas if you're a local charity and there's 3 of you, you actually can't. It's quite difficult to actually reach out and get to that information because you're too busy just, well, I guess putting out fires in the work that you're doing, which I think is kind of what you're saying at the back there. So yeah,
I've got 4 people in my team and have been on the funding crisis shit for quite a while myself, but we prioritize measuring impact because it's so important and motivator to what we do and what people work with us to, because we've got such a purpose-driven organization, which is exactly what you guys have got. That impact measurement is one of our priorities. We put it up there along, so only 4 people in a team. We haven't got any training. But we've kind of learned as we've gone that this is, that purpose, theory of change, what we're trying to achieve here, what are the sensible ways of categorizing. That's how we try to really distill it down to simple.
Yeah, I kind of think that there's both the that aspect where if you're gathering the right data, it becomes addictive to you. It's essential to you. You need it. But I don't know if there are anyone else who wear the Garmin. I use the data that this delivers all the time, and it tells me things about myself, including diagnosed health conditions before the doctor has. They still don't engage with that. NHS still trick to pick up. Anyway, so data that's essential you do want, and every organisation wants. But funding has institutionally kept organisations so weak. So that the thing about small organisations not even having the time to, come to a conference, or even if the right metrics are out there to find them and implement them, that's a choice that we make in how we fund organisations. And I think we kind of need to stand up to that. Funders need to take responsibility. But so, like funders, if a funder funds in the social care space or the mental health space, maybe they invest in gathering some of this stuff together. They invest in a community practice. They help create some of the tools. So you don't need a master's to do this. Actually, there's stuff off the shelf. But then you are going to collect data it's management information. That's what I don't get is we have to have information to do our jobs. And yet we seem to think that it's all right to have organisations that are so weak that they can afford not to have management information.
I'm conscious we are up against. So I wonder if we could have a closing sort of statement from each of you.
Sure.
Just some reflections.
I kind of think in systems nature, and I'm always a bit ambitious to think with the things I want to be able to achieve. But for me, part of the answer is an ecosystem of open source methodologies, metadata, so labels and data that you can access and search so that you can find the system or the tool to help you, no matter the size of organization that you have, no matter the combination of experts that are working in your organization. And for that to be partnered in methodology terms with systems where a system is required in terms of processing data or harvesting data or leveraging data so that there's a much more level playing field across organizations, no matter their size. And then it's incumbent on the organizations to really think about what being professional looks like for them and how they achieve their aims if they have those assets at their disposal.
No controversy there. I agree 100% with the need. But yeah, I think open and collective as shared. I've said before, and absolutely 100% believe in. I also think though that we need to work out how to make this work, this impact measurement work much better for both the practitioner and the people that we exist to serve. And so I think we're not anywhere near that yet, but I think we can be. And so that's, we need to listen better and engage practitioners. And we need to listen better and engage the people that we're there to serve. And then when we start getting eyes lighting up because they're excited by what we're finding and they're using the data, then we know that we're on the right track. And then I think it's not a burden. It's a huge huge benefits to the people who work and those who are supposed to be there.
Yeah, I think I would probably build on Tristan's point about that kind of who are we there to serve and what's the funder looking for. So often there's like over data collection for some kind of spurious numbers of like you would record, I went to this conference and there were 200 people there. KPI tick. Like what that means? What did I achieve by just writing those numbers down? So I think challenging who you're trying to serve and challenging the funders, the why question. Why do you want that? How's it going to help you? How is it meaningful? So you know that you're really directing your resources at the right type of question, type of patient gathering.
I think there's a challenge, ultimately, isn't there? Hitting the target but missing the point. Phrases that's often used in those contexts, and that can be something where you measure what's easy to measure, not what matters. I think increasingly this is where I think the world of tech and things might help us unlock some other ways of doing things as well. So thank you very much, everybody. And thank you for the audience participation as well, which is all really, really good. I think there's now tea and coffee and other things like that, so you can do that. But yeah, quick, should for your panel.